3, 2, 1.
All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Bram Wigsel. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing here at ibex, and I'm thrilled to have you all with us today. Now, our topic, as you know, is how to master AI governance for CX success. Now, as you may not know, ibex is currently engaged in deploying some highly sophisticated AI solutions for our clients. These range from real-time multi-language AI voice translation solutions to highly personalized Gen AI chat and voice virtual agents. Now, to get these implementations right, AI governance has become a critical focus of our AI strategy. Getting it wrong can result in damage to the customer experience and, of course, can put the client brand at risk. Getting it right will mean a seamless, safe, and successful AI implementation. Now, the question is, how do you get it right? To answer that, let me introduce our guests, and we will get right into it. So, first up, we have Jim Ferrato, ibex's CIO and resident AI technology wizard. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Bram.
Next up, we have Wadad Insuli, ibex's Senior Vice President of Customer Success and Business Insights, and ibex's AI performance management expert. Welcome, Wadad.
Thank you. This is going to be a fun conversation, Bram.
Yeah, I think so too. A lot to get into here. So before we get started, for the audience, please don't forget to drop questions into the Q&A widget throughout the session. Our speakers will try to respond, but most likely via the chat feature. So let's get into it. Jim, I'll start with you. Let's start with the basics. What does governance mean when it comes to AI in CX?
So AI governance in an organization is really around its framework, policies, practices that allow you to effectively deploy AI and, more importantly, manage it on an ongoing basis to ensure that you don't have bias introduced, to ensure that you're compliant with all local and government regulations, to ensure that you've got a very, very strong data security model, and you're constantly refining and testing and monitoring your AI implementation within the framework that's been set up.
Got it. And with that, any insight from you on this side of things?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, AI governance to me is how do you manage both the data and the systems that use the data and making sure they're being used obviously safely and responsibly. When I think about AI in the CX world, governance is about continuing to keep the customer data secure, as well as making sure there's always this ongoing audit and quality process to track the accuracy of the data you're getting from the AI and that you're putting in front of customers. And it's really important to make sure we're always keeping a pulse on how customers are reacting to that technology and that interaction.
Got it. Yeah. And I think you both agree that governance in general isn't necessarily an easy thing to achieve, or effective governance isn't easy to achieve. With the AI landscape still growing and rapidly changing, what sort of challenges should CX leaders expect when implementing effective AI governance protocols? And I guess, Jim, we'll start with you.
So one of the biggest challenges is the rapid pace of innovation in the AI space. You know, the constant addition of new features, new functions, all introduce a level of risk around the predictability of the solution that you're deploying. You know, you might be on one framework or platform one day, the platform's been upgraded, and suddenly you might have additional biases, you might have inaccuracies. So constant performance monitoring is critical when you're deploying AI tech, especially as you're in the upgrade process. The other piece is the evolving nature of governmental regulations. The regulations have lagged a bit, particularly around data privacy. You know, you've got that strong data privacy in California, in EU, GDPR. And so now they're just coming to grips with kind of the issues of using consumer data in these models. So, you know, staying on top of compliance is critical, and that takes a very focused and dedicated resource to ensure that you're staying within the guardrails.
Got it. And I think a question that we've had come up is, when it comes to compliance, is how do you balance the need for innovation and the speed with which the industry is changing and how brands must adapt? How do you balance that need for innovation and adaptation with the kind of the need for watching out for compliance and making sure you're staying compliant and following regulations?
Well, it really comes down to applying the framework that you've got in place around AI governance, everything from the ethics piece to ensure you don't have bias, the compliance piece to ensure you are within the bounds of the regulations, performance monitoring to ensure that the AI is responding appropriately, data governance to ensure that as you evolve your technology, you're not collecting data unnecessarily. That could cause an issue further down the road. That's all about data retention. So those are some of the principal areas that as you continuously evolve your technology, you need a continuous monitoring process from a governance perspective.
Got it. Okay, and let's move on to the next question here. When executing effective governance, what level of technology or process sophistication is required of the client? And I guess, what are the prerequisites for effective governance, in short?
One of the things that is critical from a client perspective is access to the back-end data that makes AI function and productive. So what kind of systems are you accessing on the back end to provide things like self-service and updates? What is the API set? How secure? What is the security model of the API set? So you're ensuring that as this AI model, as your AI bots, voice and chat bots are accessing the data, they're doing it in a secure fashion. So that's probably one of the critical pieces around an AI implementation, as well as, an agreement with the client in terms of what problems are you trying to solve? What are the expectations of the bot? What is the bot roadmap as you expand and evolve the bot functionality? You need to make sure you're in lockstep with your client around expectations and performance.
Got it. And with that, that's a good segue too when it comes to the performance piece and the kind of the process involved. Can you speak to that as well, the prerequisites for effective governance?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to what Jim said, what I also think is important both on our end as well as on the client side is the new skill set you need just from an employee perspective. Like when you think about this integration of AI and you think about AI developers and engineers and being skilled in prompt writing and making sure that between us and the clients we support, we have that right skill set that knows how to take the technology and evolve it and drive it effectively. Just from my perspective, like I have a QA and BI organization, and we are in the process of adding into this team new roles that are solely dedicated to AI technology, that will keep a pulse on the quality of AI and the AI CSAT. And so our data analysts will go from typically looking at customer survey data to now learning how to compare AI bot CSAT to agent CSAT and looking at that like across similar call intents, which is a new way of looking at the data. And it's a skill we're currently training our teams to do. So I think making sure we're set up with that skill set and then making sure our clients on the other side, we're matching jerseys there is important as well.
What you mentioned the skill gap. What sort of pressure do these new skill gap requirements put on brands and businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all kind of learning and evolving how we want to source for different technology. I think what we've seen is different technology requires different skill sets. Some of them are a little more black and white if you're thinking like AI, IVR, and there's a very scripted kind of pass or fail rate if you hand off to an agent. Others are a little more nuanced, and where do you kind of intercept that as well? And so just really understanding the friction in the experience and then where the technology can kind of stand alone and where it can't, and having the support system behind it to both be analyzing that data, tweaking the models, and then looking at kind of the customer journey on the back end is a is a function that, you know, we're all working towards at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's move on to a recent CCW Market study. They found that the top AI concern for CX leaders right now is implementation. So let's start there. You're looking to integrate Gen AI at key touch points across the customer journey. What governance practices do you start with to ensure a successful implementation? And Wadad, let's start with you.
Yeah, so the first thing I think about is data insights always before the solution. I think, you know, your question is integrating generative AI at different touch points across the journey. And so my immediate thought goes to, you have to know what those touch points are, and you have to know what the journey looks like to be able to do that. So there's got to be solid insights first around what does the experience feel like from the minute a customer interacts with a company. Typically, you know, they'll start with an IVR, but where are customers trying to go? We call that the intent. So the customer intents. What do they need to do? How many of those intents you can classify as simple versus complex? How many of those intents require the empathy of a human and need to be handed off versus which ones can be automated? And so that's kind of the discovery process, the way I see it. And you have to follow that similar discovery process when it comes to how customers engage with you across all channels. You have to do it, you know, in voice and IVR, chat, social media, et cetera. And then at each friction point, you're then determining, once you've assigned a call intent, a level of complexity, then you decide if it makes sense to be automated or not. And that leads you into a large suite of AI offerings, and you begin to tailor which technology you should use in which situations. I can give you a couple examples of you know, the most frequent ones we're doing today, if that's helpful. Sure. So probably the first place customers go to when it comes to AI is authentication. A lot of companies today have an agent still handling authentication, and the parameters to authenticate in general are pretty standard for a company. And so that's something that I would put in the bucket of low complexity and low variation. And so this is a place where we've been successful introducing AI. The tool is called ibex Authenticate, but what it essentially does is it'll verify callers based on fields in the CRM. And it'll take the caller down kind of different routes based off their call intent, their contact history, their order history. It will authenticate them and then send the call to an agent with a verified flag if it's been authenticated, or an unverified flag if something didn't match. And then based off of the level of interaction that the customer is having with the Authenticate tool, it can also pass along helpful context to the agent. So even if you weren't able to authenticate, but you're telling the IVR or the AI what your call intent is, it'll give the agent like an AI summary. It can give them call sentiment. It can give them a small transcript. So that's an example of how you can take a very simple task that drives long AHT out of an advocate's role, and they're able to just get to resolving the issue more quickly. And then with AHT reductions, obviously you're able to free up the agents to focus on more complex tasks, which is the objective of AI essentially.
Got it. And when it comes to this AI, how accurate is the intent recognition, and how does governance play a role in that?
Yeah, so I'll speak a little bit on the accuracy of that, and I'm sure Jim can chime in on the governance. I mean, what we've seen specifically for authentication is around an 80% accuracy. So what that means to us is the percent of calls that go through AI and that are passed along as verified from an authentication perspective is around 80%. What's nice with authentication is, again, there's not a lot of gray in the process, right? You have your last 4 digits of your social or your phone number or whatever those parameters are, and there's a very clear match. So there isn't really a lot of room for error. And so the accuracy rate is very high, and we typically see about 80% authenticated with a flag. And so that's been an easy and clean place kind of to implement AI for us.
Yeah, and so from a governance perspective, as Wadad mentioned, authentication is a fairly binary process. It either works or it doesn't. And so, the QA processes are fairly straightforward. When you start to get into the more complex models around AI making a decision as to, providing customer information, FAQs, customer policies. I mean, those start to become a little bit more freeform, and that's where the governance model really needs to kick in around things like, have you introduced bias in your models? Is the AI bot accurately responding to a customer query? There's a couple of different components there. You want to make sure that the AI bot is operating properly so it's not impacting your customer satisfaction score, and also that it's staying within the boundaries of what it's supposed to be responding, and not really going beyond those boundaries and possibly introducing inaccurate information. So the more complex the use case, the greater need for governance across all of those factors like compliance and bias and data management and data privacy.
Yeah, there's also the customer experience governance process. When Jim said that, he just reminded me. So if you think about another place we would use AI, think about it from like a translation perspective. So today, clients have customers who want to interact with them across a multitude of languages. And sometimes, carrying a niche language carries with it also very high advocate labor. And sometimes that's difficult to manage from a client perspective because the volume could be low and you have a very small amount of agent headcount, et cetera. And so using AI in this example is, it allows you to engage with customers in the language they want to, overcoming any sort of language barrier where, you essentially have a native speaking English agent who's getting translation real time. And today there's a lot of language queues that exist. And there's a very large impact to customer experience when you have, an agent translating to another agent who's translating to a customer, and things get lost in translation. So being able to overlay AI on top of a solution like that, you have the agent who's the subject matter expert who knows the client, the product, the process, and is able to interact across multiple languages. And then to Jim's point, there's the governance from a CE perspective and kind of the governance for customer experience. And the customer experience is vastly better when you're talking to a subject matter expert versus a third-party translator. But you're also, with the technology, you're able to track AI CSAT to agent CSAT, and you're able to do it by call intent. And so you can very easily compare where do you have stronger customer experience outputs with AI and without AI, and use that as well when it comes to governance and being able to kind of tweak the interaction flow based off that data as well.
Got it. Okay, very, very interesting. So we've talked a little bit about kind of pre-implementation. We've given some examples of where governance plays a role in the actual technology itself once it's implemented. But let's go back a little bit here to, you finished your pre-implementation preparation, and now you're looking to actually implement your AI and deploy. So I guess, Jim, we'll come back to you. What best practices and technologies are required to ensure an effective AI deployment?
So, I mean, a lot of it is kind of cookbook approach. You take cookbook approach to the deployment itself. So first, as what Dad pointed out, you figure out what problem you're trying to solve. You understand kind of what the underlying data model is. Is it structured data, unstructured data? Are you leveraging metadata? Another critical component is the APIs that you're using to access the backend data. That security model, along with how do they scale? What is the maximum number of transactions they can handle? How does that match up with your expected traffic? So really understanding the technical architecture and the breakpoints is critical. One of the pieces that people are still getting their heads around is QA in an AI environment. Typically a QA from a code perspective, as opposed to agent QA, is you take a use case, you would run regression testing against the application you built. You know what the answers should be, and you correct code accordingly. QA in the AI world is very different because you're presenting questions to a model that evolves over time. So the QA process becomes much more complex. Is the bot responding with the expected answer? So there's an approach you've got to take to QAing the bot responses that is very different than you would get if you're QAing a traditional code environment. So pre-deployment, that is critical. Pre-deployment, also one of the critical things you need to account for is ensuring all your stakeholders are engaged and aligned, because this represents your brand now. So is marketing comfortable with the persona? Is legal comfortable with the potential liabilities? Do you have the right technical resources, which are scarce in the AI world because of the exploding demand? Do you have the right technical resources to deliver on the product that you're trying to build? So unlike traditional coding, there's a much broader set of stakeholders that need to be informed, and in a lot of cases, their approval is required as you start to develop these solutions kind of in pre-deployment mode.
Let's move now to an audience question. This came in during the registration phase of the webinar. So here it is. How do you integrate new AI technologies without disrupting existing CX operations?
Depends on the technology. Some AI will be seamless to the agent and to your operations. If you think along the lines of accent neutralization, for example, or real-time translation, or a self-service bot or IVR, it's important to have awareness for agents to understand that there is a form of AI that's now part of the interaction flow, but at times it won't disrupt how they go about handling their interaction. And then I think other technology will require handoff to an agent. And in those situations, you're going to need training and you're going to need integration into the existing workflow. My observation typically has been that agents know that AI is here. They know it's going to transform how they do their jobs. What we found is it's just really important to be transparent and be clear on how we see AI and agents and interacting and what does that roadmap look like. Something that conversations we've been having internally is, we tell our advocates that AI is not going to replace your job, but someone who uses AI could replace your role. So making sure agents are comfortable with how to use AI and how to integrate it into their roles is something that we're very focused on.
Got it. Thank you with that. That's a good answer there. All right, let's continue along the governance journey. So your AI systems are implemented, programs are launched. What are the governance best practices for monitoring and maintaining the systems you put in place? Jim, let's go to you for this one.
So monitoring is key, kind of almost in real time. So if you've got a dashboard that's showing, the confidence level of the responses, the kind of real-time sentiment analysis based on the, kind of that real-time analysis of the interaction between the bot and the customer, monitoring almost just like you would do real-time monitoring of an agent call, you're going to be doing real-time monitoring of bot interactions, whether it's chat or voice, to look for keywords that would drive alerting. Alerting in terms of, just in the voice world, you have a supervisor drop in. You would need to have somebody drop in to look at that, listen to that interaction or review that interaction in real time, or build those backdoors that say, if the interaction has got a particular score or hearing particular keywords, it will take you out to an agent. So you always need that backdoor to an agent environment in the AI world. Then you also, aside from the alerting process, you need a built-in or pre-built escalation process around what happens when things start going, or the bot starts acting in a way that's not planned. So you don't really want to handle that with an email and say, send to a marketing department, hey, we've got this bot, problem, you may want to look into it. You need to have a real-time escalation process to be able to take the steps necessary to either shut down the bot, change some of the bot parameters so that the performance is back within predictable boundaries.
Got it. And Wadad, from your side, from performance management and insights, what are your thoughts there on maintaining the systems once you've deployed?
Yeah, I think to me, it's all about understanding how the tools impact the end customers who are interfacing with them. Jim talked a little bit about, chat bots. We can use that as an example. Like if you implement a chat bot, that means at that point, you've already determined what we talked about earlier. You've determined what intents a bot can handle. It's in place, and now you have to maintain that process. The next step becomes kind of what Jim was alluding to, is measuring how accurate and effective it is compared to a human chat, and what's the impact of AI on that customer experience. And so some of the things you would look for is measuring, what's truly being deflected against what did you anticipate? Like what percentage of contact drivers did you think would be handled by the bot versus what is being handled? How many disconnected chats would a bot produce versus an agent? And understanding, to Jim's point, that handoff process, like agent handoff is very important. Understanding when does it make sense to hand it back to an advocate for resolution? And then analyzing, are there issues with article effectiveness, right? That a bot can provide better data points within an article at times. Something else that we found that's really important in the bot piece is understanding contact resolution and repeat contacts after a bot interaction. So there's one thing to say a bot resolved the issue, but then it's like understanding, did they repeat? And if they did repeat, did they come back to the same channel? Within what time frame? Was the repeat for the issue the bot should have supposedly handled? Was it unrelated? I mean, there's a slew of insights you can glean from that. And then a really big trigger point for that becomes, how do you use the data to action? That's where you typically layer in what we call our proactive outreach. So understanding, the triggers as you're analyzing the data of customer behavior. AI is a very low cost, effective tool for proactive outreach. Once you understand, if there's that point where that needs to happen, and you can use AI very easily there when you think about SMS outreach, real-time messaging, video education, etc. And so that's just an example of, in the chatbot world, how we would monitor AI. But really the concept to me is always analyzing the AI tech real time and improving the technology accuracy and the effectiveness of it. And it really applies to really any AI tool we would implement.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for that. And Jim, you mentioned in your response AI going off the rails or AI hallucinations. I guess the question for both of you: how often does this happen? And how easy is it to remedy, typically, if it does?
I think it happens more than you might think. There have been some very, very well documented instances out there around bots providing wrong information that had a serious financial impact for the companies involved. Misinterpreting company policies on things like refunds or upgrades. Your bot now represents your brand, and if it's providing wrong information, that could cost you. So hence the need to build that framework to ensure when it does go off the rails, it's caught very quickly. I think at a lower level, we've all had frustrating bot experiences, and I think we've seen brands roll out bots only to see their what you would think intuitively would improve your customer satisfaction, because it's 24/7, it's immediate, you don't have to talk to anybody, actually reduces their customer satisfaction because of frustrating bot interactions. So I think it's fairly common. We've not really hit our strides in terms of deploying seamless AI bots, except in more binary situations like what Dad had mentioned earlier around authentication. So I think we have a ways to go before bots truly mimic humans in more complex scenarios.
Got it. Okay, yeah, thank you. So it seems like from what both of you have been saying is that effective governance is an interplay between the automated AI systems and skilled humans. Can you unpack the human AI dynamic as it relates to AI execution and governance? Jim, I'll come back to you for this.
Yeah, so humans in the loop is a critical part of any AI deployment. So humans really, they provide the oversight, they provide the accountability, the bots provide the scalability. So as some of the interactions are designed to have a human in the loop, so they're collecting information, they're categorizing, they're deriving intents, so that when it does get to an agent, the agent is much more effective in handling that issue because they can see all of the work that the bot's done up front and therefore get to the resolution much more quickly. Then there's the requirement of humans in the loop to kind of manage a broad oversight of the bot interactions and then to proactively intervene if they see something going off the rails. So the human in the loop piece is really designed around kind of the outcome that you want to get to, whether it's handling complexity or handling oversight. Are the two different components of that interaction.
I would add any thoughts from you on this?
Yeah, I think one other thing is, to Jim's point, when you think about the human in the loop, there's the agent piece of the human in the loop, but then there's also the back end piece of the QA review and assessment process, and how do you do that as well to ensure, kind of to your point, the governance of it and the execution of it. A place that we use AI today is in call monitoring as well. And so while there are so many benefits that come with using like this AI application, one of those benefits is, imagine using AI, we're monitoring 100% of an agent's interactions versus standard human QA process across the entire industry would be 1 to 3% typically. So having AI produce a QA score output real time and at scale is really, really powerful. Now, having said that, there's a ton of benefits there. I can talk about them probably for longer than you have time, but you always still have to supplement the AI monitoring with human diagnostic, which is kind of, to Jim's point. And so for manual tasks that an agent does, AI won't be able to tell you if the agent followed the right process in the CRM accurately. It may not be able to tell you with a certain level of accuracy if it processed a refund and the right amount, et cetera. And so this is where we always will add in like a human overlay to ensure they're validating the customer experience from all aspects of it. And that's where we find the balance between AI quality at scale, which has huge benefits, but then doing an overlay of manual reviews as well. And so the way I look at it is AI is about like shining a light on the opportunities to quickly quantify them and to identify them. And you're able to use AI to look at it like from the world view, but then bringing in manual QAs to identify the top, 4 or 5 countries that are problematic.
Got it. With that, since we do have some more time, I'd like to go a little bit deeper actually into the mechanics and best practices behind integrating AI-driven insights into the customer journey, how this works and how it's governed. So yeah, can you unpack this a little bit further for the audience? And I don't know if you have any examples you can provide as well.
Yeah, so I think a couple minutes ago, like I touched on chatbot analysis and using the analysis to understand call intent, resolution, if an issue is resolved or not, tweaking the AI for better responses, et cetera. Using AI monitoring as well will really provide insights into all these interactions, voice and non-voice. One way we use it very effectively is it allows you to track customer sentiment across all touch points. So if you think about the world today from a client perspective, a lot of clients are using customer survey data as a standalone, which we know is what we call solicited feedback. If you just take a minute and think about how much richer the insights are when it's scaled to all your customer volume, and you're using customer sentiment and customer friction, and you can identify frustration words and analyze all the unsolicited feedback that your customers give you, it is really powerful. What I tell my team, if I think about the QA function, is you need to listen and you need to pay attention, because customers are giving you like nuggets of insight into what they think about your brand every time they interact with you. And so being able to use AI to kind of to scale that and really pick up on that across every touch point, every interaction, and using that data to continue to improve the customer journey versus just looking at a slice of it, we found to be very beneficial.
Got it. Okay, yeah, thank you. So I'd like to shift the conversation now towards something you brought up at the beginning, Jim, ethics and compliance, and go a little deeper on those. Let's start with ethics. How do you ensure that the AI systems used in customer interactions adhere to ethical standards, and who is establishing these ethical guidelines? Jim, let's go to you.
Yeah, so I think, as part of the framework for AI governance, obviously ethics, particularly around bias, is important to make sure you account for. So as you're developing your models and testing your models, understanding any built-in biases towards a particular I don't know whether you call it a particular community or the responses you're getting back from customers is accounted for in as you build the back end data models. That's probably one of the most critical components from an ethical perspective in terms of that interaction with the customer. Has the model been fully tested to ensure that it's handling all of those interactions without introducing bias? One of those areas, and with that, you probably talk about it a little more depth, is if you think about now when you were handling refunds with an agent, you had to make sure you QA'd the agent to ensure that they were treating everybody equally, within the same parameters of the discussion. So just like you QA'd that agent for unintentional bias, you need to QA your bots along those same lines. So that's probably one of the biggest issues around ethical use of AI.
Got it. Without any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. No, I completely agree with Jim. And I think, again, there's a pros and cons to everything, right? And just the beauty of AI is just having the wealth of that data accessible to you. And so to Jim's point, making sure you're analyzing by community, by process, average amounts of spend, et cetera, and just ensuring kind of you're looking at variation in the process, to Jim's point, just like you would look at variation in an agent process, and just being able to action on that is a very important kind of audit function that we have today.
Got it. And shifting to compliance and regulation, I know we discussed this a little bit at the opening, Jim, but how do regulations affect the overall AI strategies, especially if you operate globally?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You've got a kind of an interesting interplay there. AI works best when it collects a tremendous amount of data. The more data it collects, the more effective it can be. From a consumer perspective, though, especially in areas that have very, very tight data protection laws, you need to ensure that the consumer has provided informed consent for the use of that data, and that you're only collecting the data in that interaction that's absolutely necessary to perform the function. There was a recent lawsuit, I think it's still ongoing in California, where consumers felt that the bots were collecting and storing more information that they were comfortable with, and they had not provided informed consent. And so that's I believe it's ongoing. So if you think about in the early days of QA and voice recordings. You always got that announcement, this call may be recorded for quality monitoring purposes. You need to have similar statements up front in the bot environment to ensure customers are aware that you're collecting every scrap of data throughout that whole interaction that will be saved and analyzed without possibly the consumer knowing the end use of that data. So that's a real hot button in California, GDPR in the EU, and states. A number of states are also looking at similar regulations as California has.
Got it. And with that, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Jim just made me smile when he said, this call will be recorded for quality assurance purposes. So yeah, I mean, to Jim's point, it's just making sure that you're very clearly articulating, right, how you're going to use the data, getting that consent. That doesn't change from an AI perspective. And so just, making sure you're checking those boxes is extremely important.
Okay, great. One thing we haven't really touched on yet, and I think it's a big topic, of course, when it comes to AI and CX in general, is security. An IDC survey recently found that more than 45% of respondents felt that security concerns are the biggest challenges associated with implementing Gen AI. So, question, I guess I'll start with you, Jim. How can organizations feel confident in data and privacy protection when implementing AI in their CX programs?
So some of those best practices don't change whether you're taking phone calls or deploying AI bots. It's all about data management. So you want to be able to collect the least amount of data. You collect the minimum amount of data to ensure the bot effectiveness. You maintain active data collection and management techniques around who has access, what is your data retention policies, just where is that data stored and the security around that data. You want to make sure you're using, industry standard encryption technologies to ensure that data at rest is secure. You want to train your employees around proper data management techniques, whether it's a data used for a bot or data used by agents. So really, the data security piece is very, very similar to what you would have in a traditional IT organization. You've got to ensure that if you're collecting data in a healthcare environment, the data is stored in a HIPAA compliant environment. That foremost is, the data stays in the US. If you're, SOC 2 or ISO compliant, you've got to ensure that data handling meets all of those requirements, regardless, again, whether it's human interaction or bot-driven interaction.
Got it. And you mentioned, obviously, in security, you mentioned, ingesting a lot of customer data. And one of the big kind of features of AI is this idea of personalization. How do you balance this need for AI to increase this level of personalization with protecting customer data?
So from a customer data perspective, most of this customer data is coming from back-end systems. So obviously, you need a very strong set of APIs that's producing this data, and then also the customer is supplying information. Say if it's a HIPAA environment, that would be considered PII or personally identifiable data that would be sensitive and require a certain level of confidentiality. So again, I go back to security best practices. When you roll out a bot, understanding what that interaction is going to be like and what that data stream is going to consist of. You may anonymize that data if you need it to continue to train your models, stripping out any PII data. But essentially, it's the same mechanism should be in place as you would have in a traditional voice call.
Got it. Okay, thank you. This brings us to our final question here, and I think it's a good one. It's both of you. What are the top 3 actionable steps that CX leaders should take away from today's discussion regarding AI governance? With that, I'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah, top 3. So I would say 1, making sure your organization is structured in a way not only to launch AI solutions, but also to have the support needed to analyze the outputs, which we talked about a lot, and really be prepared to modify and to continue training the technology. By no means is AI kind of a set it and forget it process. It needs that constant iteration. Second, I would say leading with data first and always. I think AI will, and it does drive immense cost savings, but knowing where to use it and when to intercept the interaction with a human is very important to automating while ensuring no degradation to brand at all. And then lastly, I just think we're all tracking and watching how AI evolves and how that impacts all of our roles. I think staying plugged into those changes, to Jim's point, they're constant, and changes to the governance of the technology will definitely keep us all on our toes. And it's always good to keep learning. And AI, I think, is somewhere where we are all still learning for sure.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think with Dad covered them. Probably for me, the biggest critical point that comes out of all of this is the expanded stakeholder responsibility. As you talk about AI, it has really evolved to the point where it's going to require informed consent across all kind of departments within your organization before you deploy, as opposed to afterwards. So understanding legal and compliance regulations, understanding the impact on the company brand around, persona, brand reputation. These are things that existed, before in the contact center space, but have taken on I guess, higher level of importance given the immediacy of AI interactions and the scale of AI interactions. You're now scaling well beyond what you could do in the past with voice agents. So I think the immediacy, the need for escalation, the need for constant monitoring and incident management, should these things go off the rails, is critically important.
Thanks, Jim. Good answer there as well. And I guess that brings it to a close. I think that's all the time we also have for today. So I want to thank Jim and Wadad for joining us. That's some great insights. I hope it was beneficial for the audience. If you do have any follow-up questions, please head to www.ibex.co. You can reach out to us there. We can help you with upcoming AI implementations or any of your CX needs. So thanks again. Hope to see you all in the next one.
Thank you, Bram. Thanks, Dad.
Thanks, Jim.